So hello friends, I think now it's time to be back on our actual sessions. The inaugural session went off very well, and now we are starting off with session 1, the manufacturing category, and we have 5 organizations lined up. I would be introducing them. First would be the judges, followed by the presenter and the presentation. That's how the sequence would be planned. It will culminate in a Q&A, followed by that Q&A is around 20 minutes, and which will be followed by the breakout session with judges who will be looking at the scoring and based on the presentation as well as the interaction during the Q&A, the final scores and recognitions will be presented. We will be having a sequencing of the runner-up certificate, followed by the first runner-up, second runner-up, first runner-up, and then the MQH main trophy to the winner of that category. So this is the manufacturing session. But before that, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our Director General, IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Ajit Mangrolkar. He's truly an inspiring leader for all of us. Sir is there with us online. I will be formally showing the video, but sir, can I have a few words from you? Can I have a few words from you, sir? Can someone unmute, sir?
Sir, you will have to press the
may I request
mute
you to
button.
unmute? Yeah.
I'm unmuted. Thank you so much, Maya and the team RBN QA. As always, you come up with some brilliant programs, and this is, of course, keeping with the times. We are all in the online mode or virtual mode, and it's great to see you all come up with this feature. And I wish you all the very best. And with the kind of quality participants that you get, it's really, really very reassuring, and that we are doing some good work, and all of us are with you. Keep it up. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So now I will be playing the formal address of sir to all of us. May I have his video, please? Thank you. Thank you.
Hello friends, the IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry is proud to present one of our flagship events, the MQH Best Practices Competition. For the very first time, we have reinvented it in an online format, the MQH Best Practices Competition 2.0. The competition will have presentations from various organizations across sectors of manufacturing, service, education, healthcare, and NGOs. We are proud to say that Indian organizations are on par with global organizations. Performance excellence is an integral part and has helped organizations to enhance their systems and processes. Since 1996, the IMC Ramkrishna Bajaj National Quality Award Trust has been guiding organizations in the excellence journey. The IMC RBNQA Awards being one of the prestigious award processes in our country. And the MQH Best Practices Competition 2.0 is one such initiative of the IMC RBNQA Trust. Hope all of you will have great takeaways from the various sessions. Enjoy the cross-industry sharing of best practices. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful motivating address. We will now request our panel of judges to be having their video on and their audio also unmuted. We will be bringing you into the spotlight right now. So for this first session, session 1, manufacturing, we have Mr. Rajagopal Mukundan, Consultant Quality Solutions Consultancy. He's also been a very great senior team leader with all of us. Thank you so much, sir, for your contribution to our process.
Thank you, Maya.
Yeah, the second judge for today is Dr. Mini Panikkar. She's founder, Sahabav. Thank you, Mini. And let me tell you, she is one inspiring lady. She has her own hospital she runs, which she now has converted to a senior citizens home. Absolutely dynamic, Mini. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
yeah. Thank you. So we have the two judges who will be taking forward the assessment. May I now introduce the presentation and the presenters. So we begin with Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited, Mumbai Refinery, Mumbai. We have with us today Mr. L. Sriram, DGM Quality Management. May I have him in the spotlight, please? Mr. L. Sriram. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, so much for your time and your participation. You are also an absolutely dynamic person. Thank you for that. So we will now play your presentation, sir. And then at the end, after all the presentations, you will be taking part in the Q&A. Yes? Thank you so much. So may I have the BPCL presentation on for the benefit of our viewers?
Good morning to all of you. I'm Sriram from Bharat Petroleum. On behalf of Bharat Petroleum Mumbai Refinery, I thank the authorities of Ramakrishna Bajaj National Quality Award Trust for this wonderful opportunity and a great learning platform. Before I get on to the journey of sharing the experience of implementing a best practice in Mumbai Refinery, I just would like to give you a brief perspective about hydrogen to understand the criticality and the importance of hydrogen in the refining process. Globally, cleaner fuels are produced by a process called hydroprocessing, which demands hydrogen's presence to remove the sulfur from the feedstock and to make cleaner fuels, which we call it as Bharat 6 or Euro 6 stage fuels. Hydrogen manufacturing is very highly energy intensive and also has a great impact on the environment. Every ton of hydrogen we produce in our refinery lets out about 8 tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. As hydroprocessing is the only technology available today, cleaner fuels in refineries cannot be manufactured without hydrogen. And hydrogen is going to be the theme of the best practices which we implemented in Bharat Petroleum Mumbai Refinery. This is a typical configuration of hydrogen value chain in any refinery across the world. On top side are the hydrogen producing units, and at the bottom are the hydrogen consuming units to manufacture cleaner fuels. And all these units are operating at different operating conditions with pressure profile, demanding a very high and accurate level of steady state of operations to convert dirty feedstock into cleaner fuels. There was a challenge in front of us, but we knew that the challenge was not insurmountable. We have been wasting about 3 to 4 tons of hydrogen to the atmosphere as a safety measure because we were not able to strike a perfect balance between demand and supply of hydrogen due to operating conditions of various process units. The challenge in front of us was to find out the best practice and adopt a disruptive technology to prevent this wastage of hydrogen and save about 3 lakh rupees per day of wastage, and also to reduce the emissions, that is about 24 tons per day of carbon dioxide. After an in-depth study, we could understand that the then existing advanced process control was not adequate enough to strike an 100% balance between demand and supply of hydrogen. To understand this theme, it is imperative on our part to understand the practice which we were employing earlier about this hydrogen chain in Mumbai Refinery. Hydrogen production was always used to get governed by the operating pressure of hydrocracker unit. The logic was the demand controls and governs the hydrogen production. And the demand is again influenced by the change in the pressure of hydrocracker unit. That means whenever a hydrocracker unit pressure gets upset, then signals are passed on to the hydrogen unit to adjust the hydrogen production rate, thereby maintaining a constant pressure of 19 kilograms of hydrogen grid. Please note, whenever the pressure of hydrogen grid goes beyond 19 kg, there should be a safe disposal of hydrogen which will be burnt into the stack, and this hydrogen is waste and it is irrecoverable. The biggest problem with this process was the hydrocracker unit's operating pressure used to fluctuate on a real-time basis, and this triggering of signal going to the hydrogen unit for adjustment of production and the maintenance of hydrogen grid pressure used to remain in a cyclic process, because by the time one loop gets concluded, pressure upsets has already taken place and the second loop will start. This inconclusive operation resulted in the inconsistent pressure maintenance of the hydrogen grid, and hence 3 to 4 tons of hydrogen used to get flared into the atmosphere. And this has put an enormous pressure on the operating profile of hydrocracker unit from operating pressure point of view, and this fluctuation was putting this entire system into an unsteady state of operations. However, after a great analysis, data collection, step test, we found the logic of advanced process control need to be changed from earlier change in the pressure basis to the rate of change in the operating pressure of hydrocracker unit would be an appropriate parameter to influence the hydrogen adjustment. We also found out the slope at which the pressure profile was dropping very heavy was taking place beyond this safe and comfort operation of 154 to 159 kg. Please note that a pressure profile of 154 to 159 kg is considered to be a comfort zone where the operation used to be in a steady state of operation. So we also brought in a disruptive thinking into the process of putting off the controller when there is a steady state of operation between 154 to 159 and putting it on when the pressure goes beyond this range. This disruptive technology has resulted in fewer signals going to hydrogen unit for adjustment of production, and we were able to maintain a constant pressure of 19 kg of the hydrogen grid, thereby preventing the 3 to 4 tons of hydrogen flaring. The result is the hydrocracker operating pressure was remaining consistent, and hence the operation of hydrogen manufacturing unit was also achieved a steady state of operation. This logic, this practice was tested, simulated, and deployed into the plant. A thorough monitoring was done for a period of 1 month, and at the end we could find 3 distinct benefits coming out of this disrupt technology or the best practice of advanced process control. We were able to achieve a very consistent and constant pressure profile of hydrocracker, and you can see what was happening earlier and what has happened after the implementation. This has resulted in steady state operation of hydrogen, and hence the energy consumption and the operating parameters of hydrogen unit was maintained consistently throughout the day. More importantly, the wastage of 3 to 4 tons of hydrogen has stopped, and we were able to save energy value about 10 crores annum, and an impact on environment was also achieved by reducing carbon dioxide emission to the tune of about 24 tons per day. So the disruptive thinking or the unconventional thinking of dumping the change in pressure condition as a variable and adopting rate of change of pressure condition of hydrocracker has helped us to achieve a steady state of operation of the complete hydrocracker and hydrogen manufacturing units. Why this is a best practice? We are able to replicate this practice in other units where multi-variables govern the feed rate of an operating unit. And this unconventional and disruptive thinking has been recognized by the process licensor of advanced process control. And more importantly, for this system, there is no manual intervention required, and it works on its own. We have to only ensure that the controller is up and running continuously. And this practice has been submitted to many forums and agencies and has been well recognized by international as well as national agencies. The benefits that has come out of this system are not only on financial aspects, but also environment, and more importantly, it has become a platform for motivation of people to go for innovative ideas. Bharat Petroleum strongly believe that innovation is a continuous process and the best practices are great approaches to achieve process excellence and embrace the new normal. Thank you very much for your patience hearing. Stay safe and all the very best to every one of you. Thank you very much. This is Sriram from Bharat Petroleum Mumbai Refinery.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sriram. That was wonderful, really wonderful. We will now move on to the next organization participating and making their presentation, JSW Steel Limited, Salem Works, Salem. We have with us Mr. Naveen Kumar N, Assistant Manager, who will be presenting. May I request the spotlight on Mr. Kumar so that we have an introduction to him. Hello, sir. How are you? Good morning. Yeah, I think, can you unmute yourself, sir?
Yeah, it's unmute.
Yeah, okay. Great, great. Great to have you, sir. And wish you the very best for your presentation. So now we will run the presentation. Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
I request the presentation to be played of JSW Steel Limited, Salem Works, Salem.
Good morning to all. Myself Naveen Kumar from JSW Steel Limited, Salem Works, a Deming company. I am here to present my project, Manufacture of Air Block from Steel Making Slag. It's a waste to wealth project. These are all the contents of my presentation. JSW Salem, a part of $12 billion JSW Group, is India's largest integrated special steel plant located in Salem, Tamil Nadu, with an installed capacity of 1 million tons per annum. JSW Salem won the prestigious Deming Award for Total Quality Management in the year 2019. We also certified with IAT of EAS, ISO 14001 and OSAS 18001. This slide shows our product profile. We produce rounds, billets, flats, bars, coils, hexagon, blooms and RCS, that is round corner square. This slide shows our supply chain. JSW Salem supplies majority of products to auto segments and balance to non-auto segments like aerospace, defense, railways and power sector. Here I want to mention JSW Salem holds #1 position in special steel long products market in India. These are our major customers. Direct users and end users are displayed here. We, JSW Salem, won many awards in both national and international. Recently, we got 3 gold awards in International Convention on Quality Control Circle held at Tokyo, Japan. These are the awards given by our customers and recognize our quality products. These awards are in the category of safety and CSR. This slide shows our manufacturing process, it started with iron complex, where the input for the blast furnace comes from coke oven plant, sinter plant and the ore which we bought from outside. The output we got here is hot metal pig iron. This is fed into a steel making process where the liquid pig iron is converted into steel. The byproduct which is obtained here is steel slag, which we are going to target. Then the liquid steel is sent into a continuous casting machine and then it made into a final product through blooming mill and bar and rod mill. After final inspection, the product is sent to a customer. Introduction to steel slag. What is steel slag? Steel slag is a byproduct of steel making process where the liquid iron or scrap melted together with the fluxes like lime or dolomite. This steel slag contains nearly 30% of FeO. In order to remove this FeO, this steel slag is subjected to cooling process. Then the Fe is removed through magnetic separation method. After magnetic separation, these steel slag are sent to the jaw crusher where it is crushed into different particle sizes. But due to the presence of rich lime content, this slag made less use in cement and construction industry and simply dumped in open areas where there is no buyer to buy. Hence, the development of best practice arise. In India, as per Central Pollution Control Board and Ministry of Environment and Forest Statistics said that the iron and steel industry produces steel slag at the rate of 4 million tons per annum. So with increasing steel making units by 2030, the annual production of steel slag will be 60 million tons, and disposal of this large quantity of slag will be a big environmental menace. Hence, the JSW Salem gives utmost importance to solid waste management, and we mainly focus on reducing, reusing and recycling the waste for an effective waste management system. Therefore, the R&D department at Salem Works developed an in-house technology to manufacture pure block from this steel slag. This graph shows what are the solid waste generated in iron and steel industry and their utilization percentage in JSW Salem. We can clearly see there is only 53% of steel SMS slag were reutilized. Hence, we targeted this slag and characterized and found an excellent property which meets the properties required for the pure block making. The properties are, it had good surface structure, good bonding properties and highly angular in shape, and it had good internal friction. So the pre-known process of pure block making is requires by using natural resources, that is river sand, stone aggregate and ordinary Portland cement. Stone aggregate is nothing but is a gravel. But this JSW novel process replaces these natural resources by our steel slag and slag cement. Before implementing this project in plant scale trial, we done some lab scale trial outside the plant with the same machine which is used for the conventional pure block making without modifying the properties of the pure block. The results we obtained is very promising and gave confidence to move for plant scale trial. Deployment of best practice. This is our overall process map of our pure block production. We started with steel slag which is obtained from the steel making process, and then it's sent to a crusher after magnetic separation method. Then the crusher crushed the steel slag into coarse steel slag aggregate and fine steel slag aggregate. Then this sent into a pure block plant where the pure block were produced. Based on the confidence obtained from the lab scale, we installed a high capacity pure block machine inside the plant premises and done further experiment with a larger scale. This R&D technology provides a job growth of 10 manpower per shift. This is the detailed process flow of our pure block plant. We started with E of slag, then it is crushed into E of fine and E of coarse. E of slag is nothing but it is the energy optimizing furnace slag, is also called a steel slag. These coarse aggregate along with the admixture and cement are sent to a pure block machine where all the raw materials are pressed in the mold with a pressure of 1000 psi. The output we got is a green paper and it has to be stored in a dark room for 1 day, and then it is allowed for a curing process. Disruptive results achieved. Initially, the pure block obtained from this steel slag shows less compressive strength, that is 45 MPa. As per IS 15658-2006, this kind of pavers can be only used for light vehicle application. In order to use it for heavy vehicle application, this paver strength should have more than 50 MPa. Hence, the quality improvement team were formed to resolve the issue by using Six Sigma methodology. We found that the reason of the problem lies in blend ratio and admixture quantity. So we decided to do design of experiment. We started DOE by considering two factors, that is blend ratio and admixture, with the 4 levels and 3 levels respectively. Blend ratio is nothing but is a combination of percentage of gravel, percentage of E of coarse, percentage of E of fines and cement. This is the main effect plot and interaction plot. From these plots, we can clearly identify with the blend ratio of 25:30:30:15 and the admixture quantity of 400 ml gives higher compressive strength in the product. So with this unique blend ratio and the admixture quantity, we produce a pure block and achieved the expected result. Nearly 20% of compressive strength was increased by this QIT project, and it represents in this graph. Hence, this QIT project has been awarded with the par excellence in 33rd National Convention on Quality Concept at IIT Varanasi. Monitoring the best practice. Based on the lab scale trial and the plant scale trial, we regularized the pure block production, that is by we replaced nearly 60% of natural aggregate with our steel slag. At Salem Works, nearly 750,000 pure block were produced till January 2020 by consuming more than 3,000 tons of slag. And the results we obtained are continuously monitored, and all the results are matches with our expected result. Hence, as per IS 15658-2006, the pair block having strength more than 55 ampere laid in heavy vehicle application and found till now there is no damage occurred in the pair block. Why is the best practice? This is the new, innovative and unique process where the products developed are to be eco-friendly, techno-economically attractive, and it takes care of the waste generated during the steel making process. For binder, we used slag cement which have less CO2 emission when compared to the ordinary Portland cement produce more CO2 during their manufacturing process. As I said earlier, we replace nearly 60% of natural aggregate with our steel slag. Due to this technology, there is an increase in 12% steel making slag utilization in JSW Salem in the financial year 19 when compared to financial year 18. This technology resolves the problem of disposal and landfilling of steel slag through which the environment will be protected. This R&D technology provides a job growth of 10 manpower per shift. This best innovative project has been nominated for the best innovative project in JSW Group and it can be horizontally deployed. Until now, we laid nearly 1,56,800 square meter with our pair block and through which we saved nearly 2.5 crores to our plant. And at last, the main activity of the pair block has been satisfied, that is we applied a patent for this unique blend ratio and the admixture quantity and also the method of production of pair block by using steel slag. The most dangerous kind of waste is the waste we do not recognize. Hence the steel slag once considered as a waste are successfully converted into sustainable product. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Naveen Kumar. A very, very great insight into your operations. We will now follow it up with the next organization, Grasim Industries Limited, Chemical Division, Renukut. May I have the spotlight on Mr. Sandeep Rathore, Assistant General Manager, HOD EHS. Mr. Rathore, can I have him on screen, please?
Maya, he is not in the spotlight. You can start the presentation.
Okay, fine. So I request the team to start the presentation of Grasim Industries Limited, Chemical Division, Renukut.
Hi, welcome you to the presentation of Grasim Chemical Division, Renukut. This is Sandeep Rathore, Head of EHS Department here at Grasim Industries Chemical Division, Renukut. Typically, my first attempt to be a part of such submission. This is a unit is a chloralkali unit manufacturing caustic soda as a main product and is situated in the state of Uttar Pradesh, approximately 160 kilometers away from holy city of Varanasi. And the process overview of the manufacturing process here is it is the caustic soda lye, which is the main product. It is a product produced by electrolysis of brine. The brine is actually the salt solution in its saturated form. The salt solution is purified, clarified, and to remove the suspended solids to minimum, it is polished in the filters, and to minimize the impurity level in the brine to ppb levels, there are ion exchange columns in which the brine is purified to ppb levels and then it is sent to electrolyzers as the feed brine. In the electrolyzers, the feed brine is then electrolyzed, wherein the caustic lye of 32% is produced. The caustic lye in 32% is actually not sellable in the market, so we have a caustic concentrator installed in the plant which converts this 32% of caustic lye to 48% caustic lye, which is sellable in market. Some of the portion of the lye, caustic lye, is converted to flakes, that is in the solid form on 100% caustic soda basis. During the electrolysis, hydrogen gas and chlorine are co-generated as a part of chemical reaction. The chlorine thus is dried by compression, liquefaction, and this liquid chlorine is filled in tunnels and is aluminum chloride. This chlorine generated in the electrolysis and the hydrogen gas generated is used to synthesize HCl, hydrochloric acid, which is used for again manufacturing some of the value-added products like polyaluminum chloride. And the rest, the HCl is also sold off in its pure form through tankers. Hydrogen is also again compressed and marketed. Hydrogen also is used as a clean fuel within the premises and in the CSF plant. About our best practice, as a responsible corporate, we have ensured zero liquid discharge from the unit by installing a reverse osmosis plant followed by a multi-effect evaporator unit to maximize recovery of water, and the end product from MEE is the salt which is disposed of at authorized TSDF in Kanpur. The GRCD Renukut actually is a caustic production unit with a capacity of 353 tons per day of caustic. During the visit of Central Pollution Control Board and NGT at the unit, they actually had given the directions to go for zero liquid discharge for both plant effluent and the township sewage. The unit had a very high discharge volume of effluent from the ETP, which was the major challenge to reduce the effluent to achieve ZLD zero level within a very short period. That was taken as a challenge and as a target to achieve and complete that by the unit. As evident from the graph, the total effluent generated in the year 2016 was as high as 1903 m³ per day. So by in-house modifications in the form of reduce, reuse and recycle schemes that included complete reuse of condensate, gland cooling, blowdown, regeneration water, etc., the effluent volume was reduced to 236 m³ per day by May 2017. And further, a 50 m³ per day saving was done by installation of an ion exchange column, resulting in the final effluent volume to 173 m³ per day. This effluent volume had to be again treated in the reverse osmosis, and then ultimately the final high TDS volume had to be dried off in the MEE to achieve the zero liquid discharge status. So the same is being detailed in the slides to follow. As explained before, this slide shows the effluent generation before the installation of softener unit, and in the following slide you will just see the 50 m³ per day of saving that we have gained through the ion exchange column installation. This is the slide showing the installation of the softener unit and a saving of 50 m³ per day. This is again the flow diagram showing the saving of 50 m³ per day of water by installing a softener unit. It's just a flow diagram that is depicting the same saving scheme. Here are few glimpses of effluent treatment plant with adequate capacity of collection and treatment pits with RO plant followed by MEE plant to achieve the ZLD status. This is the detail of operating parameters maintained at RO and MEE, and it is ensured that parameters are maintained within the prescribed limits. As per the typical effluent quantity for 4 years, as mentioned above, it is clear that the effluent volume is significantly reduced from approx 2000 m³ per day volume to 173 m³ per day volume. Also, this 173 m³ per day is again recovered through RO plant and MEE plant, and to attain a zero liquid discharge and having a complete reuse recycle of the effluent within the premises. Though the plant premises were declared as zero liquid discharge, but still the township sewage was not completely collected and treated. Hence, to be a completely zero liquid discharge unit, we installed a complete renewed sewage collection and treatment system for the colony sewage in the year 2019 and commissioned it in November 2019. The same is being inspected and validated by the UP Pollution Control Board team. The STP treatment capacity is 1000 m³ per day, and presently the complete volume is used in the plantation and washing activities. Further, we are also planning to install an ultrafiltration system so that this treated STP sewage volume can be used back in plant process areas. Here is a general layout diagram for the sewage treatment plant commissioned in 2019. This is situated in our colony, which is within the purview of 3 kilometers of the manufacturing area. Now, after the 24th of November, the Grasim Chemical Division, now Renukoot, is a complete zero liquid discharge unit, and that is also validated by the Pollution Control Board team through their report submitted to the CPCB and NGT also. It is one of the unique practice, as also this practice is being now replicated in other chemical units of the Aditya Birla Group, as we have 7 other units all over scattered in India at different locations in different states. So now that group has now decided that each of the unit has to follow the Renukoot practice and to go for zero liquid discharge. So zero liquid discharge practice has helped the unit in complying with the stringent environmental regulations, apart from the lot of savings and degrading the environmental in the premises. So this is one aspect that zero liquid discharge we have attained at Renukoot, and the journey to preserve the natural resources, water, to minimize air pollution and to minimize other forms of pollution, to minimize the waste generation and to systemize the waste disposal techniques. So these are some of the few focus areas that we maintained at our Renukoot division, with in a view to maintain sound environmental practices. So thanks a lot, and this is Sandeep concluding from Grasim Chemical Division, Renukoot. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sandeep Rathore, for the wonderful presentation. We now move on. Before we move on to the next organization, my request to all the participants is, can you park the question answers for the Q&A session? Because the others who are the viewers may not be able to take benefit from the, you can ask the Q&A, but the presenters need to respond to it only during the Q&A so that the others can take benefit of your responses. This is my request. Thank you so much. We now move on to Castrol India Limited, Mumbai. We have with us Ms. Sharda Kotwani. She is National Distribution Manager, and Mr. N. Venkatesh, General Manager. Yes, Ms. Kotwani, thank you so much for being here. And Mr. Venkatesh, it's our pleasure. And can you unmute yourself so that you can reach out to the audience?
Yeah, very good afternoon to all. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah,
thanks for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir. And Ms. Kotwani, Sharda Kotwani. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your presence. So we'll now move on to the presentation of Castrol India Limited, Mumbai. May I request my team to switch it on?
Hi, and good day to you. And I hope all of you and your dear ones are safe. On behalf of Castrol, we would thank you for giving us this opportunity to share with you our best practice. I'm Venkatesh from the supply chain team of Castrol, and I will be sharing with you our story on how we managed to develop and deliver a delightful experience for our OEM customers in the B2B space. Before we start, the environment around us is constantly changing and challenging. Corporations and startups are constantly trying to get control of their markets using scale, disruptive technologies, and stay more closer to their networks and customers than ever before. And all these efforts are being done to capture and deliver a premium customer experience to the customer. The OEMs have always maintained an arm's length distance while getting their franchise workshop serviced with our lubricant products. OEMs would take a back seat while Castrol would be allowed to access their network and get into touch with them, get into contracts with their franchise workshops and make sales and service their volume requirements. This is changing, and now OEMs are trying to get better control of their value chain. And this is being done mainly to get a better visibility on the volume sourced and the consistency around use of our products and the brands for which they have tied up with us across their workshops. And most importantly, I think it also gives them a better buying power while negotiating the prices for our products to be serviced through their network. Castrol has always operated with a distributor model, who are essentially resellers, and as a business model to sell our products in the market and also service the OEM franchise network. So when the OEMs came to us with the requirement to service their 580 plus franchise workshops directly from our CFA locations, we actually had to relook at our business model. So the model you see on to the left of your screen is our conventional business model that we have always been used, and what you see to your right, the green model, essentially is the model wherein is what the OEM businesses expectation were. What this model essentially means is that we had to service 580 plus workshops directly from our 14 warehouses based across the country, and there will be a tenfold increase in the number of orders that we would have to service. We also had to maintain stringent SLAs while servicing these orders, and need to ensure that there is adequate stock availability and uninterrupted supplies, because these workshop locations would be running low in terms of their stock holding. We now had to put in place a model which was financially viable, scalable, and reliable. And we also had to maintain high standards of delivery quality, and also build a capability to carry liquid cargo of small order sizes anywhere across the country. With stock availability at any given point in time being a requirement, and with very stringent levels, as I explained in the earlier slide, due to the low stock holding of the workshop locations. To do this, we had to relook at our value chain and identified key processes and areas under each step, right from the point of collection of orders till the final payment was received from the customers. The criteria here was to ensure that the order was delivered within a cycle time of not more than 10 days. That's right. We had to complete the order to service cycle in 10 days. And we had to service every order that would be received centrally from the customer on a daily basis. And we had to ensure that all the lines in the order in full quantity of the order was serviced and delivered to the customer, and also real-time updates were available to these workshops. We worked extensively with our various stakeholders with the objectives to build a system and a digital footprint. This would include e-invoices, advanced shipment notifications, and tracking of customer orders with an end-to-end visibility of the whole process, from order generation to delivery, and the customer site and final collections from the customer. The transportation and logistics team worked very closely with the service providers in a manner that the transporters that we would use had a national footprint and could move products anywhere in the country with agreed lead times. They also had to carry liquid cargo in small quantities with express delivery capabilities in a safe and time-bound manner. On the other hand, the warehouse teams had to create an express lane to process a high number of orders, which would typically be low in terms of the MOQ, and with least errors while servicing these products and shipping them to the customers. The finance and the customer operations teams had to map over 580 plus locations to the 14 warehouses, and then in turn had to reverse map all these locations to confirm the GRNs which were going to get generated when the customers receive the material into a single account of the OEM to where the invoices were being raised and the collection process used to get triggered for Castrol. Now, having created this particular system, we also needed a model to ensure that it is continuously monitored and the performance of these various aspects at various lengths had to be measured. We reviewed the service performance measures, which we call as DIFOT, delivered in full on time, and also analyzed the failures, which could be due to logistics, could be stocks, could be credit, and we also checked the adherence to the MOQ conditions that we had placed on the customer to ensure that the model was viable and serviceable. The cost of service is an essential key driver for the whole model to be sustainable, and this is something that we continuously monitor. Regular reviews with our service provider, who are key enablers to drive efficiency and effectiveness across the process, is something that we had to track and we had to manage and monitor. Keeping all these elements which we review at periodic intervals, we meet with the customers and also share our feedback, and we also get their inputs in terms of what's working and what needs improvement, so that there is a continuous improvement process which is there in play so that we can strengthen and make the model more robust and agile. Finally, when we look at, in the end, what we achieved is essentially a final model that is more profitable by another 9% from the standard model that we were currently servicing them. In all this, there is no compromise to the quality of delivery, which stands at 99.6%, which is comparable to Six Sigma levels of performance. The OEMs now have full visibility of the volumes that have been procured and serviced across their locations, and also have an assurance that there is a consistent use of a reliable and a reputable brand like Castrol across their network. The MOQ, which is the highlight of this particular piece of initiative, was reduced by almost 75%. So from 1 KL orders, we brought down the MOQ requirements to 200 liters, which is as comparable to any retail model that you could find. And finally, we created a new service measure metric by adding one more leg to the measurement of service, right from the point of the customer work, right up to the point of the customer work site, and still delivered in full on-time performance of 91.4%, which is, we believe, a best in class for this particular business space, which is in the B2B. This, gentlemen and ladies, is our story and our journey to deliver a best in class delivery model for all the service in the service of the king, which is our customer. Long live the king. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Venkatesh, for the presentation and to showcase the best-in-class delivery model for the customer. Wonderful. I will now move on to the last organization for the session, Marico Limited, Perundurai. As I mentioned, we move on to Marico Limited, Perundurai. We have with us Mr. Venkat Ashish, Buying Manager. Can I have him in the spotlight, please? Hello? Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Ashish. Welcome to the MQH 2.0 and all the best for the session. Followed by Mr. Pradeep Ahuja. He is Head Copra Buying.
Hi.
Hello,
good
sir.
morning.
Good morning. How are you, sir? How are you?
Good, ma'am. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much for your presence and all the best for your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. So can we have the Marico Limited Perundurai presentation?
Hello everyone, I thank the jury for giving me this wonderful opportunity to present at this prestigious RBNQ Awards. Marico Limited is one of the India's leading consumer product companies that markets household brands such as Parachute, Saffola, Nihar, etc. Parachute Kalpavriksha is a flagship CSR program of Marico initiated for the welfare of coconut farmers. Marico, being the market leader in coconut oil, procures 1 out of every 10 coconuts produced in India in order to cater to its consumer demand. This makes coconut farmer our key associate, and we saw a huge opportunity and need for enhancing coconut farmers' income. We recognize the efforts of farmers in building a society and nation of tomorrow. Making a difference in their lives is part of what makes our lives meaningful. If you look at the challenges faced by modern day coconut farmers, primarily their crops are giving lower yields. Secondly, they don't have scientific knowledge on crop management activities like pest, disease and water management, etc. Thirdly, disproportionate use of fertilizers, excessive watering of trees not only leads to wastage of precious resources but also leads to higher input costs. Looking at these challenges faced by the farmer, we saw an opportunity to improve their lives. In order to address these challenges, we launched Kalpavriksha program with an aim of sustainable and higher crop yield. Our goal is to create awareness on coconut management practices, train farmers to handle their farms independently, transform myth and belief-based farming into scientific and knowledge-based, increase yields, so in turn which helps to enhance their income. Although enhancing productivity is our key focus area, we also work on other key pain points of farmers like water stress during drought, labor issues, lack of farm machinery, training needs, Gaja cyclone issue in Thanjavur. Our productivity improvement program is a uniquely designed initiative where our agronomist visits the farm and assists the farmer in various aspects of crop management like pest, disease and water management, etc. Also, they follow up with them regarding their implementation. Currently, more than 20,000 farmers had enrolled with us across 1.2 lakh acres, which has witnessed a productivity increase of almost 15%. In order to increase our reach further, we initiated Kalpavriksha Call Care Center where farmers can call and clarify their doubts. We have reached more than 50,000 farmers through this Call Care Center. Also, we leverage social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, where we regularly publish articles, videos on good farming practices. Currently, we have more than 1.5 lakh followers for our Facebook page. Apart from this, we also leverage local channels, agri-expos to interact with farmers and promote best practices in coconut farming. Two back-to-back droughts during FY17 and FY18 had put severe stress on crop, leading to 40 to 50% drop in yields. In order to tackle this issue, we initiated construction of farm pond, which leads to increased groundwater levels and will have a long-term impact on water scarcity issues. In the past 2 years, we have created more than 160 farm ponds, which led to creation of 16 crore litre water saving potential. In November 2018, Gaja cyclone struck Thanjavur district of Tamil Nadu that uprooted lakhs of trees, devastating several coconut farmers. As an immediate relief, we have distributed around 40,000 banana saplings, which is a short duration crop that can help in short-term cash flows, and also helped farmers in regeneration of 18,000 low and unproductive trees. Gaja cyclone has led to supply shortage of coconut saplings in Thanjavur region. In order to address this issue, we have collaborated with local experts and distributed more than 68,000 coconut saplings free of cost to farmers. Labor shortage, high rentals for farm machinery and lack of field expertise are one of those challenges faced by today's farmer. In order to address this issue collectively, we have initiated an agri-business center. Agri-business center is an agri-clinic where farmer can obtain farm care inputs along with labor as a service. Through Agri-Business Center, our aim is to provide farm care services like farm inputs like fertilizers, labor as a service, farm machinery on rentals. In the past 8 months, we have started 3 Agri-Business Centers in Tamil Nadu and provided services to more than 250 farmers. In order to address the training needs of the farmers, we have set up Kalpavriksha Knowledge Center. where coconut experts will provide classroom training to the farmers. We also have a demo farm with smart irrigation setup in order to showcase latest technological interventions in the farming. In the past 6 months, we have trained 165 farmers in our Kalpurusha Knowledge Center. In the past 5 years, we have witnessed the most challenging, enriching, and fulfilling journey. We started as a pilot in Tanjavur with 6 agronomists. Today, we have a team of almost 70 people working on various initiatives like productivity improvement, agribusiness center, water conservation, etc. In a nutshell, all our initiatives, let it be productivity improvement of 15%, construction of 165 farm ponds, opening of agribusiness center, training farmers in knowledge center, each and every initiative is targeted to address the pain points of the farmer. A third-party assessment shows 91% of the farmers implemented solutions provided by us, 70% of the farmers shifted to new water management practices, 67% of the farmers reported increase in productivity, and 54% of the farmers reported positive increase in their income. So, why should we consider this as a best practice? Firstly, all our initiatives are taken towards the welfare of the farmers without any prior obligations or commitments. Secondly, our integrated strategy of agronomists and our Kalpurusha Call Care Center is a very unique model that helps to reach many coconut farmers. Thirdly, our initiatives like Agribusiness Center, Water Conservation, and Knowledge Center are there to address the pain points faced by the farmers, which helps to tackle the issues at grassroots level. The following slides provide snapshot of our trainings, demos, and interactions with farmers. These are mass trainings conducted in Tamil Nadu. Examples of best farming practices, interaction with farmers at various agri-expos. I would like to thank everyone for giving me this opportunity.
அந்த யூடியூப்பு ஃபேஸ்புக்கை பார்த்துட்டு மேரிகோட ஃபுல் டீட்டெயில்ஸ் தெரிஞ்சுக்கிட்டு தான் ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸ் சர்க்கிளில் சொல்லி அப்புறம் அவங்க இதில் என்ரோல் ஆகி நான் இங்கே வந்து அந்த ப்ரோக்ராமில் கலந்துக்கிட்டு இருக்கேன்.
எனக்கு 5 ஏக்கர் தென்னந்தோப்பு இருக்குது. எனக்கு தென்னந்தோப்பில் பூச்சி விழுந்துருந்தது. எனக்கு தெரியாது அதோட பூச்சி என்ன, இது எப்படி மரம் படுதுங்கிறது தெரியலை. மக்கள் டிவி பார்ப்பேன், மலரும் பூமி, அதில் வந்து மேரிகோ கம்பெனி டெலிஃபோன் நம்பர் இருக்கும். அந்த நம்பருக்கு நம்ம தொடர்பு கொண்டோம்னா எந்த நேரத்துலையும் எந்த உதவியும் செய்வாங்க.
அப்போ இந்த வந்தால் இந்த மாதிரி நோய், இந்த மாதிரி அதுக்கு மருந்து கட்டணும் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி அமெரிக்க கம்பெனிலேருந்து வந்தவங்க எனக்கு சொன்னாங்க. அதன் பிறகு இப்போ நான் பராமரித்த வகையில் கொஞ்சம் பூச்சி இதெல்லாம் வந்து கொஞ்சம் கண்ட்ரோலாக இருக்குது.
Noble motive of the Kalpavriksha program is to reach out to all coconut farmers, help them enjoy the benefits and make their smiles wider.
Wow, that was a wonderful presentation. Great management of the key stakeholder, the farmers. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. So now we have done with all our presentations for session 1. We will now break for question and answers. Viewers are requested to use the chat icon to send in their queries. We will have our judges who will be interacting with the presenters. The questions will follow the pattern of the presentation. So that's the direction that the judges already are aware. So all those who have had their presentations in a particular order will be ready for the Q&A and the spotlight on. So do we break for the Q&A, team?
Yes, we can.
Yes. So we start off and even have a glimpse of the judges too. Mr. Mukundan and Dr. Mini Panikar.
Ma'am, you're requested to unmute yourself.
Yeah. So we have Mr. Mukundan. Thank you, sir. We'll start off with the Q&A and as per the sequencing. And Dr. Mini is there with us, right, ma'am? Mini, we have
Yes,
her on the spotlight also? And y'all can start asking the questions, even from the viewers. Some questions have come in. You can incorporate that in your line of queries that are addressed to the presenters. So we have.
Okay, can I start with the whatever question has come?
Absolutely. That, I mean, you have the freedom. You are the judge, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, no, this is a question. I think one of them has already been answered privately by some of you, but then I'm going to repeat this for the benefit of the audience. It's for BPCL. How this new innovation compares with world-class refineries? The question asked by Ravi Leme and Sumant Pai. Can you answer this question to the audience? Sir, you already answered it, but again.
Yeah, Mr. Sriram.
Sriram.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, sir. Oh, but can you unmute yourself, sir? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay.
Just wanted to bring to your notice. Every year there is one forum called Refinery Technology and Petrochemical Meet is taking place under the auspices of Petroleum Ministry, where all the participants, both the private as well as public sector refineries in India and some countries outside India also participated. When we presented our best practice, in fact, they were all flummoxed. And we also came to know that this is a phenomenon that is existing in almost all the refineries, that hydrogen getting flat, not able to maintain the constant grid pressure. So this has become a sort of a benchmark, and BPCL has set a trend in the industry. And I am glad to inform you that the process licenses of advanced process control has also started adopting this practice when they implement in other refineries. But as far as refineries in Japan and other Far East countries, as such, I have no comparative data available now, but I would be able to collate and communicate to Mr. Limay.
All right. This question is from me, on my side. I mean, I'm asking this question on my behalf. What is the reduction in cost of operation, if any? Have you achieved any reduction in cost of operation?
Exactly, sir. For every ton of hydrogen we produce in our refinery, the operating costs, which includes catalysts, chemicals, steam, natural gas, all these things come to about 1.1 lakhs per ton of hydrogen produced. That means when I saved about 4 tons of hydrogen every day from getting flat, I have saved about 4 lakhs of rupees per day. It comes to roughly about 12 crores per annum.
All right, excellent. Okay, in India, the way of producing, you said flaring is one way of disposing of H2O. Is there any other process, for example, can I use it for reuse it, recycle it, or use it for any other energy needs?
Yes, sir. Actually, what is happening is, as a safety measure to maintain the pressure of the operating units, there is a safe disposal of gases to the flare stack for burning into the atmosphere. This is a safe way of disposing the excessive gas. We have a system of flare gas recovery. What this system does is, it takes the input which is going to the flare stack, sucks it back, treat it, make it usable for furnaces, and we will put it back. In fact, this 3 to 4 tons of hydrogen which we are wasting is beyond the capacity of the flare gas recovery system to recover and recycle back as consumption.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. And I think there are no other questions. And thank you so much for your...
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
So, sir, can we move on to JSW Steel for the
we'll move on to
question?
just on
Yeah.
JSW.
Can I have them on the spotlight, Mr. Naveen Kumar? Yes. Hello, sir. So, yeah, you're ready for the judges now.
Of course, ma'am.
Right.
Okay.
So you
Yes.
can ask, Mr. Mukundan, you can only ask what was asked in was any question asked in the chat earlier?
Yeah, there are 2 questions. One actually, Naveen Kumar had already answered it, but you can again repeat, sir, for others' benefit. Did you try this blend of steel slag with recycled plastic? There's a question by Dr. Ravi Leme.
Yes, of course, we are exploring, but JSW Salem is a plastic-free company. Actually, our main concern first is steel slag, which is getting piled up. So for that, using plastic also, we are having a collaboration project with our nearby research institute, Sona College of Technology. That also we are exploring, sir.
All right, thank you. And another question was by Suman Pai. Are you considering such a process for making not only paver block, but what about tile for roof and other things? Is it possible? Are you exploring those possibilities?
For bricks, we already started, sir. Bricks, curbstone, that and all, just we are changing the mold in our machine. And we also change some blend mixture. That we also started. For tiles, we have some other manufacturing process required. So our next CapEx project, we are exploring that one, sir.
All right. There's a question from me.
Yes, sir.
The commercial value for this. So far, you have tried only at your own premises. That's what you said. You have put it internally and tested it.
Yes.
Is it a commercially viable? Are you going to be able to produce and sell in a market and make?
Yes, sir. For that, Bureau of Indian Standard approval is required. We approached BIS for including our steel slag as a higher percentage in pure block. So yet to receive some confirmation from BIS. Still now we are a 750-acre plant. So still now we are what are all manufacturing we are implementing inside the plant itself. So on nearby where the village is required the paver block that we are selling. But commercially we not yet sold outside. So we want response from BIS that we approach. Sir.
Okay. The second question is this cheaper than the existing paver blocks?
Yes, sir. Of course, per paver for the manufacturing cost it required only 6 to 7 rupees. We included everything, electricity, manpower, and everything include, and it came around 6 rupees per paver. That with that strength, when we search it for commercially, it's come around 15 to 18 rupees per paver. So nearly for one paver itself, we have a savings of around 8 to 9 rupees.
Okay. Okay,
this is also the first time it has been done. I mean, the other steel plants, has this been ever repeated before in any other plant?
Actually, some of the steel plants they tried, ma'am, but with aged steel slag. But ours is unaged. There is a difference between aged and unaged. So for aged steel, they will remove the free lime and it requires separate equipment investment cost is required. But ours is unaged. Directly, we are crushed our steel slag into different fine fraction and simply we are implementing in our paver block.
Okay. Right. Naveen, there's one more question by Dr. R.C. Rao. Is there any other initiative, this initiative, is it being extended to other industries adjacent to you?
Yes. Our JSW main plant is in Bellary, sir. It around 20,000 acres. We are horizontally deployed our technology to that plant. They already started. So around our JSW group, we started and we also shared with some other industries wherever the steel slag is used.
Right. Thank you. Dr. Mini, any other questions?
That's all, sir.
Right. Thank you, Naveen. It was an excellent
Thank you, Naveen.
Initiative. Good.
Thank you so much, Naveen, for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Can we have Mr. Sandeep Rathore is there with us connected? Since he was not there during the initial presenter.
He's there. He's there.
So can we have him on the spotlight? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. This is Grasim.
Yeah, this Grasim Industries Limited, Chemical Division, Renupur.
Okay. So a question by Narendra Goel. What is the percentage of chlorine?
One second. One second. Yeah. Just give a second, sir. They'll just focus on Mr. Rathore. Yeah.
He got logged up again.
I think he has a problem in his video.
They are having some problem with
internet. Is he online? Then he can respond to the questions.
He's not there. His colleague is there, Dhruv.
Yeah, I think he's logged in.
Okay.
He logged in.
He's logged in? Yeah, great. Hello, sir. We missed you when I introduced you during the presentation announcement. It's great to have you here, sir. And over to the judges for questions with you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Mr.
Okay.
There is a question by Narendra Goel. He's asking, what is the percentage of chlorine in your caustic soda?
Percentage of?
Chlorine.
Chlorine? Pardon, sir, I could not get your question.
This
Percentage of
chlorine in your caustic soda, sir.
Is there any percentage
in
of
caustic soda? No, there is no chlorine in caustic soda, so produced.
Okay. My question.
Chlorine, actually, yeah. Actually, it is a process of electrolysis of brine. So, in the electrolysis, the caustic is produced as manufactured as a main product. Chlorine and hydrogen, those are co-generated during that reaction. So, those are separate streams
So
that
that's
are
what he's
collected
asking.
separately.
I think that's what he's asking.
Yeah.
What is the percentage of chlorine that you're extracting from the process? That is coming out of the process.
No. With caustic, there is no chlorine coming out. No.
Okay.
It is the membrane that allows only the sodium ions to cross there.
All right.
No chlorine ions then percolate through the membranes.
Okay. My question is here is there such existing process? You are talking zero liquid. You call it a ZLD, no? Zero liquid
discharge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
is it unique? I mean, I think zero liquid discharge is a practice adopted by many industries today, right? Because of the environmental considerations. So, why is it unique? Because what differently, or what is different there that you do others don't? Because ZLD is a common practice in most industry today. So you're calling this ZLD a unique process of best practices. What is that uniqueness that you have in this which others don't have?
In chloralkali, sir, uniqueness, actually we have reduced our effluent from a huge quantity of about 2000 MQ to 250 MQ temperature as on present day. So the other units actually don't utilize the ion exchange effluent into their processes. So that we have initiated in our processes, that the ion exchange regeneration effluent that is generated from the caustic soda manufacturing process. So that we are getting separately, and that we are using in the brine saturation process in the plant after some treatment. So that doesn't even go to the ETP collection pit for treatment also. So these type of initiatives we have taken. All the condensates, all the regenerated waters, pump cooling, washing waters, those we have dedicated in-house collection pits within the sections, and we are treating them there within the sections and utilizing them back into those sections itself. Because the effluent generation from that particular section, it is the most compatible water that can be reabsorbed or reused in that section itself. So that we are actually doing, sir.
Okay, very good.
So we are not getting all the effluents coming to the effluent treatment plant for a collection pit, and we are having a huge collection and then waiting for them to treat it.
All right. So there's a question by Sri Krishna. What do you do with RO wastewater? How is it being treated? RO wastewater.
Pardon, sir?
RO wastewater.
Yeah.
What do you do with that? How do you treat it? How much of RO water is generated and what do you do with that?
RO, we have a 600 MQ capacity, but presently we are treating only 120, 130 MQ of water in that. And the treated RO water is reused in the cooling tower makeup, and the high TDS RO water, that is the RO reject, what we call it, that is evaporated in the multi-effect evaporator systems.
All right.
And now in future we have a capex this year, so that high TDS water, that also we will have a third series of RO membrane plant to reuse that also. So the volume will be further reduced.
All right. Thank you so much. Dr. Mini, you have any questions?
There's one more question, sir, from Rohit Singh. How do you maintain the pH balance of the treated water, sir?
How do we maintain?
That's what is asked by Rohit Singh.
pH balance. Are you maintaining any pH balance of the treated water?
Of the final treated water that you showed in your PPT, sir.
pH, actually we have a batch process. We have a collection pit, and the pH is corrected at the initial stage itself. From there onwards, the pH is maintained according to that desired limit of 5.5 to 9, but we are having our limit to 6.5 to 8.
Which
So
is
that
reused again in the plant.
Maintenance is done through a neutralization. That's a common process.
I think, thank you so much, sir. That's a good
Thank you, sir.
presentation.
I think,
Yes.
yeah, we're done with the
Okay,
question.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir, for being with us. We will thank you
And
for your time.
sorry for the inconvenience from our side.
No,
That
no,
was
we
due to some
understand.
technical.
Yeah, understandable, sir. No
Okay.
problem. As long as you were able to take time out and be
Yes.
with us. Thank you so much, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
We can now move on to the next organization, Castrol India Limited, Mumbai. Can we have Mr. Venkatesh is already with us, and Ms. Sharda Kochhar. I don't know. You all have decided who's going to respond. Both will be. Yeah.
I'll take it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sharda ma'am is there. Is she there also? So I think we didn't get an opportunity for her to just say hello to all of us. Can we have her also on the focus? Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for being with us. And we are now, yeah. I think your voice is on mute, ma'am. Yeah. You can unmute. Yes, great. Yeah. So thank you for your presence here and for the wonderful presentation of Castrol India. So we now open to the judges to ask questions. I think Mr. Venk, you all can decide who is going to be responding to the Q&A.
Kundan sir, do we
Yeah.
have any questions on the chat?
Yeah, we have. One, Mr. Anandan asked a question. If you are maintaining 14 warehouse, is your inventory cost not very high? How do you manage this inventory cost? You have 14 warehouse.
I'll take that one. So,
okay, Mr. Venkatesh, yes.
So the inventory, so the distribution network is a function of the way we service our customers, and it is optimized. And in absolute terms, if I say 14 warehouses, it does look on the higher side, but we have optimized in the way we manage through our replenishment model that we have across our customers and the way we receive it. So we ensure that stock availability and everything is kept, and the reach to our customer is very fast. So that has been our strength historically and continues to be. And we have gone into this model as well. So we have 14 warehouses, as I said. On the face of it, it looks high inventory cost, but it's not as expensive as we shared in our model as well. That there is efficiency, the way we are able to extract value of it.
Okay, thank you. I have some few questions, sir. You said you have reduced your time. It comes to about 8 days, or you come down to 10 days, 8 to 10 days. Now, what was the time earlier? Order to delivery. What was earlier? How much was the reduction?
So earlier, when we look at the larger model, so when we supply to our distributor, so the earlier model was when we supply to the distributor, and the distributor gives it to the warehouses. So we have SLAs ranging from 14 to 21 days.
Oh.
And that's the SLA that we have where we replenish the distributor, and the distributor in turn takes another 7 to 10 days when they actually supply to the customer, to the workshop. So what we have done is, in this particular model, we have truncated the whole time, and we are saying from the time the franchise workshop places the order, we service the whole thing with an end-to-end of 10 days.
Right. Thank you. Then a second question is it a scalable model? You had 580 plus workshop you're directly delivering to. Right now, is it scalable? That means tomorrow, if more workshop are set up, would you still be able to deliver within the same 7 to 10 days? Or, I'm saying how fast or scalable this model is.
So the reason why we said we also had to test this out. So initially when we were servicing, we had around 350 odd distributors who used to in turn service the various customers. And that was the lead time. And what we had to really test out was, can we cover the whole journey wherever we are in the span of 10 days? So we piloted in one of the states, and which is where we looked at the viability and the various other aspects. And then we scaled it up to all the 580 odd locations that we have. And we have built capability to service around 30,000 odd pin codes across the world because of this exercise. So we have a request and we have this offering, which is unique to our OEM customers. So should anybody look at this particular model, we can definitely offer it. And that's why we say even in our current state, it is fully scalable because it's a pan-India model.
Thank you so much. I don't think any other questions there. Dr. Mini?
So, yeah, just one question, sir. So, before this this particular model was implemented, in your presentation you've written that there's a pan visibility of all the processes now. So, earlier, did you all have a lot of glitches in the system? I mean, considering it was a very high-end product. So, did you all actually, in terms of visibility of all your other processes, was it on different platforms that now it has become so easy for you?
I will take it in two parts. So on the digital part...
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your voice is not very clear. So if you can...
Okay. Is it better?
No, it's still breaking.
1 second, just hold on. Is it better now?
I think yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. A little.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we had to, I'll split the question into two parts. On the digital front, we had to integrate the systems that we have with our customers and the ERP systems that we had. So that is where we were able to integrate, because earlier the orders used to flow into the distributor solution and then it used to come into Castrol. So that is one leg of integration which happened. And as I had explained in the earlier model of service, so we have our Castrol systems, we have a distributor system, and we have the OEM system. So we ensured that we got everyone on the same path. So earlier, when we had to gather information in terms of the effectiveness and the efficacy of this service, we had to collect data from 3 points. So one was from the customer, one was from the distributor, and third, the services that we were providing. So now, through this particular whole mechanism, we have been able to streamline and there's full visibility in terms of the volumes and the quality and the service of the to our customers.
Right, sir. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
So that's a tremendous effort. Reducing from 14 days to 10 days is a good. All right. Thank you so much, sir. There are no other questions, Maya. We can move
Okay. Okay, fine. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Venkatesh, for your wonderful responses. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So we have now the last presenter. Mariko.
Yeah, now we will have Marico Limited. We have Mr. Venkat Ashish, buying manager. Can we have him in the spotlight? Hello, Venkat. Yeah. Then can we also have Mr. Pradeep Ahuja, head Copra buying, in the spotlight? And the judges.
Yeah, hi.
Hello, hi. So now we move on to the judges. You can please line up your questions for them. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Mini, you want to start?
No, sir. You take the lead again.
Okay. So you said this is, you have the initiative that you started. Aren't there similar service given by Government of India? For example, Government of India have got 7 such apps, like Kishan, Suvidha, etc. Is it similar to that, or how is it different from that which is Government of India now giving help to farmers through online contacts?
Yeah, Ashish, please.
To answer this question, Government of India has established something called Coconut Development Board. Also, there is CPCRI. These agencies have limitations in terms of resources. We have a lot of on-ground resources, which is unique to our model. And also, we have connected with various farmers to these agencies. So all these farmers are reaping benefits from these institutes that we have.
So to add on, as you said, Government of India has placed in a lot of apps which helps farmers. But if you see, the scope of the app is more towards marketing and connecting with the marketplace. right? The scope is less towards the productivity enhancement. Although they talk about productivity enhancement, but there is no active support which is given to a farmer. For us, we are giving an active on-ground support to the farmer, and at the same time, we have around 70+ people who work on the field, go to the farmer, enroll them, meet them, see their farm, do work with them, train them online, and also follow up for any other issues which are there. And this monitoring happens for almost 12 to 18 months, wherein which we also feel is, first thing is his productivity enhances. Second thing is, over the period of time, the farmer also gains the requisite knowledge from our agronomist. He becomes independent, and post 18 months, we expect him to be an independent person, handle his own farm with the scientific management practices. So yes, government has some apps. Even in fact, we are now developing an app, but this app would be defining around the complete ecosystem. But again, the focus will be on productivity enhancement rather than meeting the needs of the farmer for the marketplace. Now, there are two things to it. A coconut basically works, the coconut market works in a different way as compared to the other crops. First of all, it is more concentrated towards southern zones. There are market committees by Government of India, right? And there are different market committees set in by the states along with the Government of India. So there are platforms available, and even the APMCs now are becoming an e-platform. So that way, a farmer is having a lot of channels to sell their produce rather than depending on a particular app. That's one. And also with the recent notification which has come up, where the farmers have been given a liberty to sell outside APMC through multiple channels. That also is another way the farmers will have more flexibility to sell. So as I said, our work is more focused on enhancing the productivity rather than connecting them to a marketplace. So that's how the difference is between two apps.
All right, thank you. Second question is, how do you monitor? What are the parameters for monitoring effectiveness of your whatever initiative you're taking?
Yes, sir. So, sir, if you see normally, if you see a lot of things, a lot of practices which happen in the farming space, normally an absolute number gets spoken about. If you see other crops also, we have been doing a benchmarking with other crops also, where there is some absolute number gets spoken. A farmer has increased his income by say X percentage, but it doesn't really says how much other farmers have increased the income. So what the model we follow is we compare our farms, the Kalpruksha farms, with the control farms. Now, control farms are the farms which really are not enrolled with us. They are the farms being managed by the farmers as they were managed before. The Kalpruksha farms are our farmers where we have given these requisite services. We actually take harvest data from both these farms and see what is the effectivity of the work they are doing. Now, so with this rainfall, suppose the rainfall happens well in a particular time, the productivity of a non-Kalpruksha farm also has to increase, right? So absolute way we cannot say that we have increased productivity by say 30%. It could be a non-Kalpruksha farm has increased the productivity by say 15% because of the natural weather environment. We have increased by 30%. The differential of this is something which we report as a effectiveness of our program. Now in this, there are 3 or 4 heads which we work upon. One is the nutrient management. What is the right nutrient a farmer is supposed to give? There are both practices which get followed. There are farmers who don't really give nutrients which are required, and there are farmers who give excess nutrients. So both ways we educate them. We provide them calendars where they can monitor their nutrient space. Second thing is the space of pest and disease management. There are a lot of pest and disease management which are unnoticed in a particular farm. So we go, we see their plantation, we see how the health of the tree is, and basis that we give them the recommendation. And pest and disease management itself will increase their yields further once they put the right nutrients. Third aspect is the water management. Even water management, the practices which our farmers are following is not really right. Sometimes they give much higher water than required, and sometimes they give lower water. So we teach them or we train them the right irrigation method is and the right amount of water has to be given. The fourth aspect is we also talk about the general farm maintenance. Like general farm maintenance would be including how a farm has to be upkeep. Like there are small things which a farmer can do without additional cost, which will add on to his yields. Like a leaf which falls down, can he actually convert that leaf into a manure by just putting it near the roots? Can he do the right basement making near the tree? So all these things we keep on training them across this time period of 12 to 18 months. Beyond that also we keep in touch with them through our Kalpruksha call center.
Thank you. This is one question from Rohit Singh. He's asking, want to know how your model, how do you manage natural calamities as it plays a significant role?
Yes, so a natural calamity occurred, actually two natural calamities occurred in last 4 years. One of it occurred in Kerala where a lot of floods happened. It was 3 years back. But somehow that did not impact coconut plantation really badly. See, coconut is a perennial crop and it's not a standing tree which gets submerged into the water and it gets destroyed. The biggest calamity which we have seen is in district of Tanjavur, which happened in December 2018, wherein which around 65 lakh trees were uprooted, completely uprooted. So that's one natural calamity we experienced. See, the thing which first thing which we did is, as we said in the presentation also, we gave them the immediate relief. Now this coconut plant takes around 7 years for yielding fruits. So once you plant, it takes 7 years for yielding the required fruits. Till that time, what a farmer should do? He should move to intercropping. So what we did is we gave them some banana seedlings so that he can start his intercropping activity and earn some livelihood from that. Apart from that, we also gave them the other crops which can be taken as a part of intercropping, like bagram. There were some spices which they did, right? And parallelly, we also taught them why this cyclone led to a huge uprootment of trees. Now, if you see in Tanjavur itself, there is a CPCRI organization in which the plantation was totally not impacted. It was standing as is, it was intact. Now, what we understood why this particular aspect cyclone led to an uprootment of these trees in other farms. So what we understood is the plantation which had happened long years ago, the right method of plantation was not followed. The right plantation method is to have 3 feet by 3 feet digging and then put the seedling. Now what has happened in Tanjavur, because the water table was so high, the plantation has happened really shallow. Now that is the main cause which has led to this downfall of the coconut trees. Now when the regeneration was to happen, we first started we started educating farmers about the right seedling plantation. That's first. Second thing is we also taught them about the right seedlings, because what happens is whenever such natural calamities happen, there are a lot of people, opportunist people, who would give them substandard seedlings and make money out of it, because seedling supply was too low and the demand was too high. In fact, the seedling prices increased by around 3 times. So what we did is we started educating about the right seedling. We also made farmers trained through a CPCRI institute there so that they can make their own seedlings. Apart from that, we also made seedlings through experts, which we stated in our presentation. We have distributed around 68,000 seedlings free of cost. We have another 30,000 seedlings left, which we'll be doing after this lockdown gets closed. That's another thing which we did. The third aspect which we touched upon is what can we do about the standing trees? The standing trees were there, but because of the shake which has happened in their roots, the yield had dropped phenomenally. Plus, some trees crown was impacted. If a crown is impacted, we can't do anything about it. But if suppose a tree has been partially impacted, can we regenerate it? So what we worked with Coconut Research Institute. We fed coconut tonic to around 18,000 trees. We also propagated the same to other farmers. Now what we are seeing is a good improvement which has been seen. Now from a future point of calamity management, see, natural calamities may happen. Again, another cyclone can come up, and the cyclone can lead to another devastation, because the coconut plantation once planted, it is an 70 to 80 years plantation. We cannot really uproot it and replant it. The thing which we have started doing is propagating farmers the insurance thing which they should take for. Now, insurance is not really a said topic in coconut plantation. Again, it's not a standing plantation. Once planted, it is there for 50 to 60 years. Nobody really cares about insurance. We ourselves don't care about our life. So coconut plantation is a distinct thing. So we have started telling about the schemes which Coconut Development Board has. How can they share the insurance cost with them? This is what we have started propagating as a part of a program. That's the thing which I think will be the best thing for supporting farmers if some calamity happens.
Okay, thank
you. So did it address the question?
Yeah, there's one more question by Dr. R.C. Rao. Is it comparable to the palm oil growth promoting done by 3F company? There's a promoting of growth of palm oil. Is it comparable to?
So see, palm oil is something which is not really prevalent in India. If you see, most of the palm oil in India used is imported, right? So for us, we actually don't really compare with a palm oil as such, because these oils are quite different. One is the coconut, which is there in India since ages. The crop is there in India for ages. Palm is something which government has started initiating so that we reduce our imports and to become more self-sustained. Now, this palm is an initiative which has been undertaken to enhance the area under the palm plantation. So it's a different program itself. Now, for coconut, there is a program undertaken by Coconut Development Board which talks about this plantation enhancement. So it gives a subsidy if somebody is enhancing his plantation. It gives a subsidy for seedling and also for the cost which gets involved in enhancing the plantation. What we do is whenever we get a farmer who is really interested in enhancing or in going into the coconut plantation, we tell them about these schemes. We also connect them with Coconut Development Board. See, we have been working very closely with Coconut Development Board for many years. Especially in Kerala, where they had to make this coconut farmer committee and all that, we have very closely worked with them. We have tried connecting farmers with the Coconut Development Board, because even farmers need to know how to connect to the right authorities. So Coconut Development Board has that provision where they give some subsidies. So we try connecting farmers to the subsidies. So that's how the difference is. So both are different plantation altogether. And as I said, palm is something, an initiative which government is trying to drive to reduce the imports which we do. Now in coconut, coconut is a very it's a crop. It's basically a protected crop. We are not allowed to import copra or coconut freely. Neither coconut oil is allowed to be imported. So it's a different crop in itself.
Okay, thank you so much. I think if you don't have any question, Dr. Mini, do you have any questions?
No more.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you so much, Mr. Ahuja. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
Okay. So, judges, are there any more questions to anyone so that we are not missing out on all?
No, there are no
okay.
questions.
No questions? Okay.
No,
so done. Okay. So I think ideally now we will break into the breakout room. The judges would be proceeding further for discussions and arriving at the final winners. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we will be having the second runner-up, followed by the first runner-up, and ultimately the MQH Best Practices Trophy winner. So we will be taking around 10 minutes or so. Sorry, hello? Yeah. The judges would be taking around 10 minutes of their time, and they're now moving forward to the breakout room for their convergence. In the meanwhile, I think it's time now for a quick poll. Let's have the viewers responding to a quick poll. Natasha, do we have that initiated right now?
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe a minute or two of your time just to respond. The judges are now moving forward, as I mentioned, to the breakout room. Yeah.
So the poll has been launched?
Yeah, the poll has been launched, and I would request you to please move down further and press the submit button. So you have just 4 parameters, and as you would be aware, we have already sent you a detailed feedback form requesting you all to respond to, but that is for our improvements and all of that. This is just right now to keep our interest going and feeling motivated and encouraged. And if there are some not good responses also, please do let us know which is the area that we need to enhance. So I would request you all to please start your voting and press the submit button. We'll take a minute or two, post which we will get the compiled results, and we would be announcing it to all of you. And once again, a gentle reminder, please do fill in the detailed feedback form and send it to us. It's a Google form, so it gets automatically captured. Yeah.
We are still awaiting a few participants to participate in the poll, and then we can share the results.
Absolutely. So, yeah. Is the voting getting done, Natasha?
We are still awaiting. We'll wait for the next 1 minute, and then I'll broadcast it.
Yes, okay. For those who have not filled in, responded, I would request you to submit your response. Since this is the first session also, it's all the more important for all of us.
I think we can share the results now, ma'am.
Absolutely, Natasha, please. So we are just broadcasting now the result. Oh, lovely. We have around 74.4% voting for excellent. Good is 26.7%. Fair is 1.2%. So for the session 1, the not good is still yet to come. And we are very happy. Thank you so much. This is really motivating. And we appreciate your time to fill out this. Thank you so much. We still have time for the judges to announce their winners. In the meanwhile, as during the inaugural session, for all of those who were in the inaugural session, you did hear about Mr. There is someone who's putting up a hand, Rahul Rathi. Natasha, can you see what is the...
Yes, I'm just checking that. Yes, I'm just checking.
So in the meanwhile, Mr. Neeraj Bajaj, our chairman, had announced this new initiative of ours called the Excellence in Crisis. Now, this is an exciting initiative brought together by the newly formed Awards Committee. The Awards Committee is headed by Mr. Suresh Lulla, and the members are Mr. Umesh Dand, Ms. Suman Pai, and Mr. Johnson George, all faculty members with us and have been examiners for many assessments. So yes, they have, Suman Pai was the one who initiated this thought process, and I thank her for that wonderful idea, wherein to capture the organization's stories. You know, everybody would have good stories to say about how they met with the recent turbulent times and weaved in a lot of improvements, a lot of changes, a lot of innovations, and tried to bring out the best in their organization and still carry on with their activities and operations. And some of the organizations which we've got to hear have done a wonderful job during this pandemic situation. So yes, this is an initiative that we have introduced, and for this year, all the organizations can really talk about how they met with the COVID-19 challenge. Henceforward, the preceding years, our idea or the intention was to capture any crisis situation that the organization have been able to meet with success and weave around the agility, innovation, and the leadership drive that has put the organization in the forefront in all situations. Now, this initiative, we have made it open to all organizations. You can be from the education, healthcare, manufacturing, service, NGOs. Any organization can showcase, and there are no categories of participation. You just have to tell your story and be happy about the successful efforts that you have made to meet the challenge. And this is not more than 30 pages. The parameters or the criteria is around 5 parameters. That is basically centering on how the leadership has driven the organization. How is it that you have managed the crisis situation? What is it that you've done for your employees, to help you to have the productivity or the effectiveness coming through? So these are it's there on our website now. And so the entry, as I'm getting to see, the judges have another 5 minutes to discuss. So yes, I'll still talk about the Excellence in Crisis Initiative. The entry for all sectors, and it's free of cost. So please be enthusiastic and write about your stories. Even for us, it will be a great capture of the successes that have, been initiated in your organization. It is only after you're shortlisted at the last stage that a fee of 10,000 rupees would be required to pay. But the initial spirit is to get organizations to talk about all their success stories. So I hope I've already got a lot of interest generated, because this is exciting enough, and everybody has been in a different, I would say sometimes a little bit solitary or difficult scenarios, be it at home or any other place that you are in. And it has been tough for all. So we hope to bring in some cheer and happiness to everybody. And believe me, Indian organizations like, we've heard before our leaders saying that they are on par with the global organizations in terms of practices, best practices. And we in India face challenges very sportingly, and we come out successfully. So yes, do write to us, do send in your applications. It's simple, it's fun, and it will be absolutely exciting for you and your team. Thank you so much. The judges. Okay, yes, we have a timeline. A very good question. What are the timelines? 24th July is the submission of reports deadline. We will be having our examiners, who will be looking at all the submissions. Between the 27th of July to the 5th of August is the period wherein they will be reviewing the submissions. It's a 300 mark sort of a criteria model that we have developed. And once you log in, you will be able to get all the details effectively. There will be a preview of the judges from 8th to the 12th of August. And the announcement of winners by judges, the winning organizations' names would be announced on the 14th of August. We are trying to keep it like a pre-independence kind of a news that will be communicated to all our organizations and well-wishers of the IMC Ramakrishna Bajaj Quality Award Trust. And then we're planning to have a special program. Maybe it will be another online one. Still, or if we can get back to our routine, it will be in a different format. But yes, it's all online for this presentation. The program would have a composition of well-known, esteemed industry experts, academicians, and healthcare professionals all across, who will be lending their thought into the final shortlisted winners, and the organizations would be announced appropriately. There are 3 areas in which the awards, you're going to give your report as is against 5 parameters. Every answer, 5 parameters need to be responded to by all organizations. But the 3 awards that would be presented would be Crisis Superheroes, Innovating from a Crisis, and Learning from a Crisis. So these are the 3 areas in which we would be presenting to the award-winning organization. So I hope to see a lot of submissions, and we will take it forward, and we'll share it also later on, the success stories of our organizations. So let's do this together. Thank you so much. And we still wait for our announcement of winners from the judges. Yes, I think now we are ready for the announcements. I request our judges to please announce the winners.
Yes, thank you, Maya.
Yeah.
So the second runner-up is Grasim Industries.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. I think it's a virtual applause, but each of us will be giving them from our own end. Congratulations, Grasim Industries, Renukut, for the second runner-up victory.
Yes. The first runner-up is BPCL Mumbai Refineries.
Oh, okay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. First runner-up to BPCL Corporation Limited, Mumbai Refinery. Wonderful. Yes.
Yes. I'm delighted to announce the trophy winner is JSW Steel.
Oh, okay. Fabulous.
For their brilliant work of the paver block from their waste product, which is a patented process. Congratulations to the team.
Congratulations, JSW Steel Limited, Salem Works, for winning the MQH Best Practices Competition Trophy in the manufacturing category. Thank you. Congratulations, team. And I would request the presenter, Mr. Naveen Kumar, to please say a few words on winning this recognition. Hello, Mr. Kumar. Can I have the spotlight on Mr. Kumar? Hello. Congratulations, sir.
Congratulations, sir.
For this wonderful achievement. How do you feel? How do you feel?
Yes, that's just, I want 1 minute to...
Oh, it's not sinking in yet? No. I think you can stabilize yourself and just give us a few words.
Actually, it's a great pleasure, ma'am. It's a great pleasure. It's my first the competition, and getting the first time itself, I'm getting award.
Oh, congratulations on your personal victory along with the organization's victory. And yeah,
I want to take this stage to thank IMC RB and QA. Okay, it's a very pleasure, and they gave this stage is very much. Thank you. And also I want to acknowledge my SW Steel company, also my HOD, also my my well-wishers, everyone.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Thank you so much for your participation. And the trophy would be couriered to you when we resume office, sir. Yes?
Sure. Yes,
okay. Yes. Thank you so much. And congratulations to all the other winners too, Grasim Industries and BPCL, for their wonderful achievement. Thank you. Thank you. So yes, thank you, judges. I thank Mr. Mukundan and Dr. Mini Panikar for giving their time and their expertise into this session and recognition stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maya.
Yes, and our next session for all the other viewers, we will converge at 2:30 p.m. for the education category. So let's take a break and meet again at 2:30. Hope you all have had a great session. Thank you so much.
We did. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Bye. See you soon.